Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 in this 4-part video series on getting started in modular synthesis. In the first video, we talked about the background and the planning process and all of the thoughts that need to go into making the decisions about what you're going to get long before you ever start to actually go out and get modular synthesizers. If you haven't checked out part 1 of this, you might want to go take a look at that first before moving on to part 2, just because there's a lot of great background information that we're going to use in today's video about how to really narrow down all of the hundreds and thousands of choices that there are out there for the actual hardware itself. So when you first get into modular synthesis, the hardest thing about it can actually be the decision-making process and weeding through everything that there is out there in order to choose what to get as far as individual modules, case, power supplies, all of those different things. This video is going to give you some strategies and some resources to help narrow down the thousands of options to the ones that are right for you and your particular use. In the end, I want you to end up with the modular synthesizer that is perfect for you and what you need it. And we're also really lucky to have a couple of special guests joining us in the video today to offer their insights into choosing the right pieces of gear for you. The first thing to think about when you're making these choices is knowing your budget. In modular synthesis, as with anything in electronic music production, costs can get out of control really quickly, and knowing your budget can be a great way to help narrow down some of your choices that you're going to have to make along the way. One great tip for helping to save a bit of budget in what you're doing is a lot of companies offer DIY kits where you can actually build the module yourself and they send you all the pieces and parts for it. So if that's something that you're able to and interested in doing, it's a great way to save a little bit of money. Next, you want to really pick your use to really drive your choices of modules and case. We talked quite a bit about this in the first video, and whatever you ended up choosing as a result of those thoughts is now going to be something to help you narrow down all of the choices that are out there. As an example, for my particular case that I'm building through this process, I chose a medium-sized portable travel case because it fit the best with what I needed to go in it and the use case of wanting to be able to have this portable enough to take out and play shows with. Next, you're going to want to start to narrow down your choice of modules. A few ways that you can do this are the obvious: do some research, look online, there's articles, there's forums, there's YouTube videos. You can also check out other artists that are doing things with their modulars in a similar way to you. But be careful about this because you'll find all different sorts of modular synthesizers out there that were built to suit individual use cases for individual users. So again, the key to this is to look at people who are using their modular synthesizer in a really similar way to the way you're going to want to use yours and take some examples from them as well. Asking other people who are already into modular synthesizers and seeking out their advice is a great way to help avoid making mistakes and kind of get steered into the right direction, and to be able to actually ask questions of what would be the best things for your particular use. I'm lucky enough that a couple of my good friends have agreed to come and be a part of this video today and offer up some of their insight into choosing modules, narrowing down these choices, and getting into modular synthesis in general. My first guest in the video today is a fellow YouTuber, synth YouTuber, somebody who I watch all of their videos, incredibly knowledgeable in this and really talented musician, and one of the first people that I thought of when I was thinking, who should I ask about modular synthesis? He has a great YouTube channel, and I'm going to link that down below. You should definitely go check it out. So let's give a warm welcome to my good friend Ihor.
Hello world, my name is Ihor and I make electronic music and educational videos about electronic music on YouTube. Eric asked me to be a guest on his channel and give a couple of tips when it comes to choosing modules for modular synthesizer for beginners. And since I know quite a few things about modular, there we go. Quick disclaimer, we're talking about Eurorack modules here, but I think these tips are going to apply to any other formats. So the first one is plan carefully. What I mean by that is really take time to plan your modular system. It's going to be an expensive one. Like I'm telling you up front, it's going to be an expensive hobby. So planning and research here is quite important. So think about the purpose of your synthesizer that you're trying to build. Is it going to be like a complex voice with different oscillators, filters, folders, modulation sources, and stuff like that? Or maybe it's going to be just a drum machine with a kick drum, hi-hat, clap, and these kind of modules. Or maybe it's going to be a big sound design tool that you're going to be utilizing for creating like sound spaces and stuff like that. Depending on the purpose of your synthesizer, the choice of modules is going to be significantly different. And a quick tip here, use modulargrid.net. It's like a database and a forum and marketplace for modules. And there is a synthesizer builder. You can set the width of your case and then try to, put different modules into it and see how it goes, how much power it needs, and how much money is going to cost and stuff like that. So there is that. The second tip, check platforms. So by platforms, I mean the modules that can serve different purposes. For example, take this Ruina Versio. This is a distortion module from Noise Engineering. It's an amazing module, has quite a lot of different distortion algorithms, but also this is a Versio platform. In a matter of 1 minute, you can change the firmware in it, and from distortion, you're gonna get reverb or delay or filter or something else. Right now, I think there are like 7 of the different firmwares, if I'm not mistaken, but more will come, I guess. I really love the platforms. I think it's amazing that you can quickly, without hustle, change the module and have completely different module in your rack. A couple of platforms that come in mind are Versio, or Ornamented Crime, or Legio. This is a new platform from Noise Engineering in a 6 HP, even less than that. Or even Zoya Euroburo, because you cannot swap the firmware on it, but you still can get quite a lot of things from it. So check it out, it's quite useful. And the last tip is watch YouTube videos. This is perhaps what you're doing right now, but anyways. So if you're interested in a particular module, you can go on YouTube and check some reviews, or maybe listen to how it sounds, if it's a voice or an oscillator, get some inspiration, and really try to understand whether it works for your particular case or not. But be careful though, YouTube can easily suck you in and kill a lot of your time. With this in mind, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, thanks Eric for having me, and have fun.
Next up is someone who really needs no introduction if you've been looking around at all into the world of modular synthesizers. Trovarsi is somebody who works with different brands, different stores, different shops to help do educational videos on modular and really inspire people to be creative with their setups and mix things up and change things up all the time. Very few people have the background, knowledge, and kind of wealth of information that Trovarsi does.
Awesome. Well, thanks for agreeing to help me out with this and give some knowledge as you did when I was going through this whole process. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions. First and foremost, kind of what do you think about when you're selecting modules to be able to narrow things down? Because there's like a million choices of every single thing and it gets really super overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it can get overwhelming pretty quick, as you probably discovered in your search.
Yeah.
For me, it's about a couple of things. Like the flexibility. So when I'm picking a module, I'm thinking, how can I use it in a live performance? So I tend to want to find modules that are not only flexible, like for example, I know we talked about the BIA, and like that's a good example. So not only does it do a kick, but I can use it for a bass line or a lead, but also it's quick to dial in. It's visually easy to read. And so those are a lot of things that I like to take into consideration. Like my newest addition in my case, for example, is the Kickane, new kick module. I love it. And I love it because it sounds really good, but I can see right away, like if I want to add, more click or open up the decay, like I can quickly change and dial in a completely different kick sound without me having to really think about it. It's just like listening and just quickly dialing in. Whereas, some people like they'll take a module and use like, for example, maths with the envelope and then create a kick, which is a lot of fun to do. And if you're designing in the studio, but that takes time. And as you know, as a performer, time goes by very quickly. Like if you're standing there
Yeah.
trying to dial in something, before you know it, this other looping thing is happening and everyone's kind of listening. And like to you, it seems like a moment, but to them, it's like, 32 bars later, you know what I mean? So it's like,
Right.
right. So I like to choose when I'm choosing modules for performance, it's definitely like how quickly can I get it to change and get it to where I need it to go. Like that's super important to me.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned easy to read, because that's something for me too, is that if you're going to use it for performance, people don't realize that most of the time when you're performing, it's going to be really dark and there's going to be lights flashing and there's going to be stuff like that. And so your pupils are dilating and undilating and you're trying to see stuff. It's got to be easy to just kind of grab and not accidentally like retune everything or whatever.
Right. Exactly. No. Yeah. And some modules, as like they have like weird symbols and things like that, which are cool. But, I guess as long as that's like, if it makes sense to you, everybody's brain is different.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Anything else that you think about when you're kind of deciding what modules, if you're deciding between a whole bunch of different, let's say, I don't know, envelopes, are there things that you would say, like besides maybe price or size, that you kind of lean towards? I know you mentioned for a minute there that they do multiple things. Is that something that you look at kind of in all the modules that you look at?
Not always. No. Like I don't want to do too much diving per se, like, for example, the envelope that I really like to use is the Synths by Instro. And I like it because it has sliders and I love sliders. So as I told you, like when you're thinking about modules, like I always tell people, think about how your brain works and then decide, the layout, because what I could say I never say buy that module, like, because how I think and how you think are totally different. But I like sliders. I like being able to, slide and change the shape immediately and be able to clamp it down and close it. And, there's a couple other like really great envelopes out. There's a ton of envelopes out there, but, like how quickly can I change the shape of that envelope? Am I paging through something and then having to remember what color code it is? Like I'm not really too much into that sort of stuff personally, like in my studio for sound design, I don't mind it because in my studio case, then I have all the time in the world. You know what I mean? Like it's more for exploration and sound design, but for performance, I like to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. So like that's a good envelope for me, because then I can use sliders, I can look at it and I know just by looking at it the shape of the envelope. I don't even need to put up the fader on my mixer to hear it yet. Like I already know, like if I have the decay open too wide and I want to kind of start bringing it in slowly, I can look at it right away and know, oh crap, I better close that down a little bit and now bring up the volume.
Funny.
And like, yeah. So
it's so funny you say that, because like I have the SH101 right here, and that's my favorite thing about that synth, is that it's all sliders and you can look across it and see where everything is and know exactly what you need to adjust. It's awesome. So you mentioned something there, which actually is a perfect segue to the next question that I had. Sure. You had said everybody's brain works differently. And we were talking before about how I was so thankful that you kind of pointed me towards the Metron sequencer, because even though it wasn't your first choice sequencer, you use it with another one, but you use a bunch of them, and you said, but this one is going to be really good for you. And it's great because it does work exactly the way my brain works. And so talk a bit more about that, about sequencers, because there's a ton of different kinds. And that, I think, for people that are new to this, I know it was to me, can be really super overwhelming, all the different types of sequencers even.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, as I mentioned to you, well, first of all, I asked you, like, what are you looking to do with the sequencer? How do you think, like, how are you performing? Like for me, I'm very visual, and So I love using the vector sequencer because I can see all my notes. I can immediately know what register they're in. I can tell what scale, all that sort of stuff. But then I also use the Metron for my main, that's like my main gates and triggers, because I can write variations, and I can see linear, like 4 tracks at a time laid out in the steps. So my suggestion is just like, again, like think about how your brain operates. Like, what do you need? Do you need to see visually which notes you're playing? Like, take all those things into account, because there are a ton of sequencers. And as you know, I told you, like, I have a ton of sequencers. and
You're a
and they're,
sequencer hoarder, aren't you?
yeah, like I have like a ton of them, like, but I like them all for different reasons, but
Yeah.
again, like for performance, for me, it's like I'm using both of those together. I use the Metron, and then I use the Vector. And the Vector does all the heavy lifting for all the melodic elements, and, just being able to put things into scale and do all these other sort of crazy things, where the Metron is like, it's all about gates and creating variations and chaining patterns together and using the composition mode. So, I can send gates into the vector as well, because it's able to do that. And, so I guess that's like the first thing to do is take a look at what it is you want your sequencer to do, because chances are there's a sequencer out there that does it. Like, nothing is perfect. You're not going to find like the gold, like where it's like going to do every single feature you want, but
Yeah.
at least start there. Like, make a list, like what is it that you want out of a sequencer, and then start like looking for those features in a sequencer.
It's something that I was
Yeah.
talking to someone about recently, is that I had read this interview, I think it was with Tom Hayes or somebody like that, and they were talking about the idea of playing live electronic music is like this this conversation between humans and machines. And you want the machine to have their part of the conversation, and they're doing stuff that on their own that you wouldn't do, and then you want to have your part of the conversation too, where you're adding to it or taking away or controlling or changing the direction or whatever. And that was kind of what I was thinking about with the sequencers. You've got sequencers like the Metron that are very much, you control everything. You can go ahead and you can still randomize things, and that's great. But then you've got like Euclidean sequencers that you can just like say, make something up for me, and it'll just make something up for you. And I just love with Modular how the gates and the notes, the CV, are separate from each other. So you can make them overlap however you want, or you can just kind of, make it be the traditional way as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can get a complete, get your quantization from something else over, and some people don't even like to use sequencers, I have some friends that just they use a quantizer, and they use different types of not sequencers in the traditional sense of how we're speaking of, like an all-in-one, where it's like, the Metron with the Volterra or the Vector or the Erica Synths, like in the sense of like, first they have a quantizer, like, and then they'll have like maybe a 8 or 16 step sequencer or something else that kind of sends gates. So I mean, there's so many different options out there. Again, it's just like, how do you want to think about it?
I'm surprised how many people I've seen that don't use sequencers and that just use like a clock divider, and then they'll just set different divisions of clocks to different things.
Right.
And that's cool. That's not how my brain works, but but that's cool for them. And that's kind
I've
of the
done
point
that, but it's like, how do you move? Like, for me, it's like, I'm thinking in terms of more than just one patch, so and that to me is where it, like, having an actual sequencer that can quantize and send out gates and triggers can kind of guide you through a whole set, as opposed to like a 5 or 10 minute composition piece. Like, for me, that's just, my experience.
And I think we would all like to have all of that. And that brings us to the next question, which is cases. Like, you want to do all of it, but you've only got a certain amount of space. So what advice would you give to people about how to select a case and what to think about when you're looking at cases?
Again, it's the first thing is like, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to do? Is it something for home use and studio use, or do you plan on traveling with it? Like those are key things to think about, because if you're not going anywhere, that can totally change the landscape of how you're going to build it, or which one you're going to buy. Do you want like a big wall unit, or is this like a thing where you're going to make these an investment, and you're a sound designer and you want to keep adding more and more modules? Or are you the type of person that's like, I only want to work within like a certain size and not overwhelm myself? And so
Yeah.
maybe starting with like 6U, which is like two rows, just kind of giving yourself space, because as
Mhm.
some people start out with just a palette, but I find that when you start with a palette, you run out of space quick. You know what I mean? So it's like, because by the time you get the utilities in there and all that sort of stuff, and when people first get into modular, they're like, oh, utilities, they're not fun. But I find that the more I do the more I get into playing with modular, how important certain utility modules are. They're just as fun too as the voices, so yeah, so I know that was a long answer. I guess if you're like going for performance, I would think of like where travel. Like for example, I designed and built my case. Like Chris Myers and we sat down and we designed a case to travel. And for me, like I don't want to be carrying some heavy weight, so think about what it's made out of. I want to be able to, I don't ever want to check my modular case. You can probably see it behind me. Like I can
Yeah.
always put it in an overhead. So it's 94 HP, but I want 1U. So it's 94 14U, which means I have
Oh, wow.
3 rows on the bottom, two 3U and 1U, and then same thing on the top. So
Wow.
and that works for me for performance, but then I have like a wall case over here, which you can't see, it's out of view, and that's what I use at home. So they serve different purposes. So that's like,
Mhm.
that's something to think about. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of really cool palette cases, like palette style cases now. I know IntelliGel came out with one, but there's this other company that just came out with one, and forgive me, I can't remember the name of it, but it's similar, where it has a lot of utilities built into the
Mhm.
case itself, and that's really handy too, because maybe it has MIDI, like I think Curio or 8, or
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, I'm gonna have to look it up, and maybe you can
Yeah,
drop it in the comments or something. But
exactly.
where they include audio in and out and MIDI and things like that you don't necessarily want to buy modules for, but it's like already built into the case. So that's something to think about too. Are you saying like, hey, I only want to use it as a piece of hardware, or is it something like, what, I'm very DAW focused and I want to be able to get it into the DAW, and so that's, you got to think about that sort of stuff too, because some of those cases have some of those utilities built in too.
Yeah, that was actually something that we
Yeah.
talked about in the first video in this series, was thinking about like, is it going to be, play solo or play with others? Are you
Right.
going to, do you want it to sequence internal, or are you going to have a sequencer sitting next to it? Are you going to attach it to a DAW or use it in a live rig? Or is it going to be, mounted to your wall in your studio and you only use it for sound design? And all those things
Right.
drive a lot of the choices.
Definitely.
Obviously, bass probably more than anything else, because the
Yeah.
case is do you have to move? I love that you designed your case that fits in an overhead, and you can take it with you. It's a crazy amount of ability to get that much stuff in an overhead.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy that you said 14U.
Yep, 14U, but at 94 HP. Because it was where so I still have it, and I love it. I have an Elite modular case. That was like my first performance case, and I still
Mhm.
have it, still use it. It's 12U, but it's 104 HP. And I found that sometimes, depending on the airplane, like if I could I was really nervous, like, so it would fit in the overhead. I think one time I even put it in like the pilot's closet, and so then I was like, okay, like I don't know if I really want to be, as a woman traveling by myself, do I really want to be like carrying something a little bit heavier for me, and then not have to be able I didn't want to worry about having to check it. Like, what if I went overseas? Like, all those sort of things. And so
Right.
I had to kind of take all those things into account. And so that's where I came up, with Chris and we came up with this design because it's just easier to maneuver,
Yeah, that's
for
awesome.
me,
That's
I
cool.
throw it on like one of those like rollies, like suitcase rolly. I roll it like how people carry, roll your little carry-on suitcase, and I just boop, throw it up above. I don't need anyone's help. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
like I keep it pretty self-sufficient, and
that's
that to
awesome.
me, that's important, because that is a stressor when you're traveling. For me, it's like, oh, like every time I go to get on the plane, like I got to think like, oh, like, is there going to be enough over room? I didn't want to think about that when I have a bigger case, and this
Right.
is like, it's the size of, it's smaller than a little carry-on suitcase. So yeah,
That's
but,
awesome.
but
Awesome. Well,
yeah,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
of course,
And
anytime.
always love your insight. You've given me so much good advice through this whole process that it's awesome. And I wanted to get you on here so we can pass on some of that amazing knowledge to a bunch of other people as well who are just getting started in this. So thank you
Well,
very much again. I appreciate it.
you're welcome. Yeah, anytime.
All right. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much to Ihor and Trovarsi for helping me out with this video and for answering all of my questions that I've had along this process, and there have been a lot. These two people have been an amazing source of information for me and have really helped guide my decision-making process into my own case. One of the most important bits of information that I got when I started to ask around was to choose the things that you need, not just all of the things that are available. You're going to get different opinions no matter who you talk to, and it's all going to be based on their use. And the amazing thing about Modular is that it's really customizable to the individual. So what works for somebody else may not work for you. With this in mind, for my case, I chose to have diverse types of voices, of oscillators. So I wanted to be able to have a wavetable, something that was a bit more complex, digital, something that was analog, and things that had real character and the ability to shape character. I like more gritty sounds, so I wasn't looking for the most clean sounds out there. And this really helped drive my decision process into the voices that I chose. It was also really important to me to have something in the case that was a controllable and very performative sequencer, as well as a controllable and very performative mixer. With the mixer, it was really important for me to be able to monitor with headphones while I was performing, to be able to have the front of house hear something that I was playing while I was listening to any changes that I was making that I was about to move to in the next section of my live show. I love filters. And so I wanted to make sure that I had one filter per voice, but that were swappable so that they could be patched in different ways, and that they were filters with character so that they would add to the sounds rather than just taking away. So I opted for some filters that had things like wave folding and distortion that could be added in, as well as just filtering out the sounds. And finally, talking about modulation, this is where you get a lot of different opinions. When you talk to people, some people will say you can never have too much modulation, you can never have too many envelopes, you can never have too many LFOs. And a lot of that is because of their individual use cases. And it's really important to be able to modulate a modular. For me, I wanted my case to be much more immediate and interactive. I wanted to be able to do the modulation myself by turning knobs and even patching things on the fly during a show, rather than having a lot of modulation sources that were cross-modulating each other and modulating individual things without me having any interaction, so I could just kind of let it go. So I opted for a combination of those, but my choice ended up being much less about modulation source modules and much more about things that could be manipulated immediately by hand during the performance. One other great source of information and way to kind of narrow down all of your choices is to reach out to your local community, your local synth community, but also to your local synth shop. Where I live, I don't have a local synth shop, so I actually turned to Perfect Circuit, the sponsor of today's video, to be my local synth shop. If, like me, you don't have a local synth shop, Perfect Circuit can be your virtual hometown shop. They have an amazing selection of synths, drum machines, recording and pro audio gear, and Eurorack modules. And they ship worldwide from their independent shop in Burbank, California. The team at Perfect Circuit is more than knowledgeable. They are all musicians who use this gear regularly, and thanks to their passion for sharing their knowledge, you can learn a ton from them while all the time feeling right at home. Thanks so much to the whole team at Perfect Circuit for helping make this video possible. Next, I want to talk about one of the most important pieces in this whole planning process, purchasing process of getting to my first Eurorack case. I could not have done this without this fantastic website, which is called modulargrid.net. Modular Grid is an unbelievable free resource that allows you to research, test, plan out, even lay out your future case in a way that you can see. It gives you tons of information about the choices that are available, the price, equipment specs of each thing, including things that are really important like the power draw and the cost. So when you go onto Modular Grid, one of the first things that you can do once you've set up your account, you can click on racks. And this will take you to a whole bunch of racks that have been created by other people. And this includes a lot of, artists and musicians who are performing regularly. It includes a lot of hobbyists as well who have, used Modular Grid in order to build out their cases, and they can be inspirational to you as well. Both of today's guests, Trovarsi and Ihor, have their cases on Modular Grid. So if you just go in and you search, for example, Trovarsi, you're going to get a whole bunch of the different cases and racks that have been put together over time. And each one of them, each time Trovarsi does a different show or educational piece, tutorial, something for, a different company or a different sponsor, the case for that individual video gets put up here. So it's a great way after you watch a video to go back here and actually look through the specs of what's been built. So let's just take one of these for example. If we were to open up this case here, you can see all of the individual units, what they are and how they were laid out. And if you hover over the units, you get this information, like you get a quick spec of information that shows what it is, power draw, cost, the HP, the width, which we discussed in the first video. So how much space it's going to take up in your rack and things like that. If you want some more information, you can click on the information block here, and that takes you to a page all about that module. You can read exactly what it is, how it was built. There's links to the website. It gives you things like the price. It gives you a whole bunch of shops where you can go on and purchase that. So for example, if you wanted to get this particular unit and you clicked on Perfect Circuit, you can go straight to Perfect Circuit. It tells you they have it in stock. You can add it to your cart and you can purchase it just like that. And if a shop doesn't have it in stock, you can always check out one of the other shops that's listed on here, or you can go online to reverb.com, or there's a whole bunch of different marketplaces, Craigslist, things like that, in order to be able to find these on the used market as well. So what's great about Modular Grid is that it allows you to test out things and practice them as well. So you can go in and, for example, I was looking at some different ideas for some different things in here, and you can add and subtract different modules and make your selections down here below. When you're getting started, if you go to Edit and New Rack, it takes you to this page where you can start to build your modular from scratch. You decide the type of case that you want, which we've already talked a bit about. So for example, I chose a minimalist case because I wasn't going to be using one of these other types. So I just wanted an example of the right size. My case has 2 rows, and each one of those rows is 104 HP. I wanted it to be in Eurorack format, but you can see that there are other formats listed as well. And if you want to have any 1U rows, you can pick one of those rows to be a 1U. You can add a 3rd row. So say you were going to use a 7U rack, you would have 3 rows. Only one of them would be 1U, and the other 2 would be 3U. And if these things, U and HP, don't make any sense to you, go back and watch video number 1, because we talked a whole bunch about how Eurorack cases and modules are measured. It's very important when you're figuring out what you're going to put in your case and what's going to fit. So once you get to this point and you've got everything set and you click save, that takes you to a brand new blank case. So now we can start to look at what modules we want. And in this module finder down below, it's easy to shop by manufacturer. If you heard of a specific name of a module, whatever you want that module to do as a primary or secondary function, the height. So if you want it to be 3U full size or only 1U because you're filling in a 1U section. If you're limited on the width, you can put in the number of HP that you want it to be either max or exact. Let's say you have a specific space to fill and you want it to be that, and you want to see all the modules that meet that. This is a good way to be able to do that. When you get into build type, we talked a little bit before about DIY, so building your own or fully assembled. And there's a whole bunch of different options that you can choose and ways to sort and, other ways to narrow down. So let's say we were starting off and we wanted to get an oscillator first. So let's go into function, scroll down to oscillator, and now it's going to list all the different oscillators without any kind of limitations. If you want to sort by what are the most popular oscillators, you can sort like that, and you'll see that the number one most popular oscillator on Modular Grid right now is the plates, whatever you want to call it. Everybody calls it something a little different. But if you also want to narrow this down a little, so if you want to choose a specific manufacturer because you like the way that they put things together, or let's say you were looking specifically for something with a max width of 12 HP. So if you search under that, it's going to narrow it down and only show things that are up to 12 HP. And you can change that. You can bring that down to 10 if you want. And that's going to change your selections. You can sort by price. If you're looking to get something in a specific price range, you can then add, let's say you've got your 12 HP width, you've got your oscillator that you're looking for, but you particularly want a wavetable. So you can add wavetable as a search word and click search again. And this is going to now list out the most popular up to 12 HP wavetable oscillators that are available. So as an example, I chose the black wavetable VCO from Synths. So if you click on the information button down here, you can actually go to that information page and it'll show you every time your search term came up in that. It'll give you a whole bunch of information about it. It will give you places in the marketplace where it's available, like Reverb and things like that, plus all of the shops where it's available. And it gives you a really good indication of what this is and how it works. If you want a closer look at it, you can click on the item itself and it zooms right in on the actual controls and everything with that individual unit. So then if you decide that that's the one for you, then you click on the plus down here. And then when you scroll back up to your case, it will be already in your case. And let's say the next thing we want to look for is a complex oscillator. And this is going to give us an example of different complex oscillators that are available out there. If we don't know quite what kind we want, we can go right back to our search and we can say, okay, I like this. I want to read a little bit about it. I like this. I want to read a little bit about it. So another one of the modules that I was really interested in is the Basimulis Iteratus Alter, or the BIA. When I spoke with Ihor and Trovarsi, both of them recommended this. It was the first module that was recommended by both of them. And again, click on the information. It says exactly what it is, how it works. It can work as a drum voice or a percussive synth voice or as a regular synth voice. And again, you can look in at what are the controls, what can be actually changed and modulated, what different settings that it has, what options for plugging in modulation on and automatically, and decide if it's the right one for you. And again, if you choose this one, as I did, you click plus, and then you go up above, and it's in your case. Next, I wanted an analog voice. So we go back here, and we see the different options that are available out there for analog voices. And again, you can choose what's popular, what's versatile, pick the color that you like. A lot of these, like for example, the BIA, when you go into the information here, it'll show you some of the alternate versions of it. So there's a silver version and a black version. So depending on if that's important for you. After looking through a whole bunch of these, I really loved the TSL from Instro. And so I decided to put this in my case. It has a number of different waveforms. It's got a sub oscillator, and it's got the ability to do wave folding, which I thought was really interesting with an analog voice. With multiple outputs too, these different waveforms, including the wave folded version, can be used to modulate other things. So this can act really as a modulation source, as a lot of oscillators can as well. So we hit plus and add it to our case, and we've got our 3 voices here. Next, I wanted to look a little bit at filters. So if we click again on filter, we can decide what our size max was. I wanted to keep this relatively small. So let's move this down to 8 HP. And let's see what are the most popular filters with a max of 8 HP. And we can start to kind of scroll down, look through, pick and choose which are the ones that were most important to you. One of the ones that came really highly recommended to me that I ended up going with was the carbon filter from WMD. Again, it's got a lot of versatility. It's a state variable filter. It is also a wave shaper, and it also has built-in distortion. And so for me, that was really interesting to not only have something that I could use as a filter in the traditional sense, but I had the opportunity to use those other things if I wanted to. And there it is in our case. And you'll see that it's just putting things in wherever the next empty space is. If you want to move them around, you can slide things around and it'll tell you how much HP you have on either side of it once you move it. So if you, instead of having all of the oscillators together and then all the filters together, you wanted to have oscillator, filter, oscillator, filter, if that was the way you chose to do it, you can move these around. You can put the filter there, and then put your next one here, and then bring in your next voice. And let's say you've only got 5 HP space left. Then when you go back into your module finder, you can reduce this down to 5 max, hit search, and again, look for the most popular ones at this size. So I really liked the Viol Ruina from Noise Engineering. I loved the distortion sound when I listened to a few examples of it on YouTube. So I ended up going with this. So again, it puts it up there, and you see it puts it in the first available space. So there was 5 HP left there, and it's only 4 HP. So it fills in that space, and we can kind of move this over so that they work, right? Or again, if you want to have these all out here together, you can do that as well. And that's the great thing about Modular Grid, is that it gives you the opportunity to try out different layouts and formats and modules. It allows you to search by the size that you want or the size that you need for your particular case. And it gives you a lot of great options. Another cool thing about Modular Grid is that it keeps a running total down here below of your power consumption, which becomes really important when you look at the power supply of whatever case you choose. It also gives you the depth that you need for your deepest module that you have here. Some cases are much thinner than others, and you can't put certain really deep modules in those cases. And so keeping an eye on this is really important as well. And perhaps the most important thing is that it keeps a running total of your price that you have so far. So as you can see, they can rack up pretty quickly. We've got 3 voices and 2 filters only, and we're already at $1,231 retail for these voices. So keep an eye on this if price is really super important to you in making your decisions. It also tells you the number of modules, and why this is important is a lot of the power supplies in the cases will have a certain number of places that you can plug in your modules. And so you always want to make sure that you have enough spaces to power the number of modules you have. Not just the power draw, but also the number of actual sockets to plug those into. And finally, here on Modular Grid, something that's great is this data sheet. Once you've got your whole system built out here, if you click on data sheet, It shows you each individual module, what row you put it in, the width, the depth, right? So you can see that the Instro was my deepest module, and that's why it was giving me that 42 millimeter max. And so it gives you the depth. It gives you the number of milliamps that it pulls at positive 12 volt. Also the same for negative 12 volt. And some of them have a 5 volt draw as well. Like the BIA pulls 80 at plus 12, 5 at minus 12, and 90 at plus 5. And those stats are summed down here below, and that's going to give you your total power need for the power supply in your case. So modular synthesizers are all about planning, decision making, and trade-offs. You may only have a certain amount of space left in your case, and you need a particular type of module that there's not enough space for. You may need to then go back and reevaluate another module or modules in your case to see if you can find something that performs a similar task or the same task in a smaller number of HP to be able to free up the HP to add in another module that you need. And that decision-making process can be complicated and time consuming, and Modular Grid just makes it way, way easier. So to sum up, when you're narrowing down your choices for what you're going to eventually put into your modular case as well as the modular case itself, you want to do just a few things. Number one, know your budget going in. Decide what that's going to be and stick to it. Number two, get what you need for your use, not just what everybody else has or what the most popular, coolest thing is. Make sure you do the research and make sure that those individual modules are going to do exactly what you need them to do in the way that you're going to use your case. Number three, seek advice and help wherever you can. Friends, forums, YouTube videos, your local synth community, your local synth shop, Discord, Reddit, anywhere you can find information. But just be aware that everybody's information that they give you is coming from their own personal experience and their own personal use case. What may be the best piece of gear for one may not be the best piece of gear for another. So it's important when you're interacting with these people and places and shops and things like that to ask them good questions and be specific about what you want to do individually with your particular modular case. Number four, use Modular Grid. It's an amazing free resource to be able to pick units, try things out, move things around, test out layouts, search based on all different types of criteria that are going to make you narrow in kind of on what's available for what you need for your case and for the amount of space that you have. Thank you so much to my good friends Ihor and Trovarsi for their help with this video and with this entire process that I've been going through. And thank you also again to Perfect Circuit for your sponsorship, without which this entire series of videos wouldn't have been possible. I hope the strategies and the resources in this video can help you in narrowing down your choices and in building the perfect modular system for you based on your use case and your preferences. Thanks so much for choosing to spend a little time with me here today, and I hope to see you in the next video. In the meantime, take care of each other.